fascinating session on developing writing skills. Happy learning, everyone. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear us okay? Are you there, Victoria?
Yes. Hello, George.
Excellent.
Hello, everyone.
Can everyone hear us okay? Just in the chat box? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much for the introduction, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here presenting to so many teachers from so many different parts of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you are. As Karen said, my name's George Heritage. I work in the Assessment Services Department in the Madrid office for Cambridge Assessment English. And Victoria?
Yeah, and I work with George as well in the Assessment Services Department in the Madrid office.
And there are a few familiar faces or names, should I say, in the chat box. So welcome back to all of you who came to our series, or our previous series of webinars, which finished yesterday. I think our colleague David Bradshaw, who we work with in Madrid, is also in the chat box. He'll be doing his best to, hello David, there he is, to keep on top of any questions as we go. This will be quite an interactive webinar. David will send a couple of links to some documents that we'll be using to look at writing. And yeah, I hope this is useful for everyone. What are we talking about, Victoria?
We're talking about writing criteria and how they can be useful.
Exactly, and useful for you as teachers. I think if you bear the criteria in mind when you're setting your students' tasks, it makes it easier for you to then use the criteria to mark the tasks effectively, but also making sure that our students are aware of the criteria, that they're very aware of what is expected of them within an exam situation, can really help structure their writing. A lot of focus, I think, always goes on grammar and vocabulary, but this is only one part of our writing. So hopefully we'll become more aware of the various areas of criteria that we use at Cambridge English by the end of this. And I hope you all enjoy yourselves. So, as I said, this is going to be quite interactive. So please try and keep up in the chat box. We'll be asking you to contribute. So to start off, Victoria,
we're going to ask our participants a question. We're going to ask them if they think that we write more or less than we did in 1998.
Right, answers in the chat box, please. Do we write more or less? Less, more. Ooh, a little bit of a split. Less, of course. We write less. I think far more. It's always nice to have a bit of disagreement going on in the chat box. Less. Oh, more but digitally. I think we write less. Oh, there's a very nice answer. More but not as long. What do you think, Victoria?
Yeah, I agree that I think we write more, but we write differently.
Exactly. I think we write considerably more today than we did in 1998, and a much broader section of society write a lot more. I changed my phone last March, I think, and I downloaded one series of WhatsApp messages with a friend, and we'd sent each other 27,000 messages in 6 months. I think we're all writing a lot more. Our students are all writing a lot more, sometimes for the better, I think, digitally, definitely, but an advantage and perhaps a disadvantage for us as teachers with writing digitally, things like autocorrect come into focus. So people are thinking a lot less, perhaps, about their spelling, their grammar. So, yeah, I think we definitely do write more today than we did in 1998. So, let me just... There you go. Right, so thinking about that, why do we write? Today, think about the last 10 things that you wrote. Why do we write? What do we write? And why do we write? Think about the last 10 things that you've written. To communicate, yes, to express. What types of things have you written recently? A thesis, very nice. Essays. emails because we have to. Some of our students might feel like that sometimes, I think. To give ideas, to communicate, emails, delivery messages, diaries, SMSs. Do you say SMSs or SMS? What do you think, Victoria? I would say SMSs, I think, probably.
Okay.
To share opinions, post on social media. Shopping lists. Does anybody write shopping lists? Do you write a shopping list, Victoria?
Yes, I do. Every week.
On a piece of paper? On your phone?
I used to write it on my phone, but now I use a piece of paper because I think it's safer now that we...
Yeah, you don't want to be touching your phone too much when you're outside, I suppose, in the supermarket. Shopping list on phone. Daily job list, very nice. A to-do list. Okay, lots of different approaches. We're going to be looking at some more exam-specific pieces of writing in this. But moving on from why do we write, what is good writing? Again, in the chat box, what do we think? What characterizes good writing?
Clear language. Well-organized ideas.
Appropriate style. Correct use of grammar in capital letters. Excellent. Clear, on target, fluency, authenticity. A flow of ideas, nicely structured. Yep, correct structures. Tell everything precisely. Clear and concise. Interesting for the readers. That always helps, I think, especially our poor writing examiners who look at hundreds and hundreds of essays on the same topic. Setting the purpose, being aware of the purpose. Punctuation in capital letters. Punctuation is very important. As we all know, it can have quite an effect on the meaning of a sentence if punctuation isn't used correctly. Clear, understandable, coherence, lovely. Okay, what do we come up with, Victoria?
Well, all of our ideas have already been mentioned. So the first one, correct spelling. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Okay,
correct spelling.
Want our texts to be, our words to be spelled correctly.
Yeah.
Also, correct grammar, which is going to make also the message more clear. Yes, and also, as they said, clear punctuation definitely helps to communicate the message.
Yes, I think this does depend on the purpose of the writing. I can think of a few Nobel Prize for Literature winners whose work intentionally contains interesting approaches to spelling and grammar and punctuation. So again, I think the purpose of the writing always has to be more borne in mind when we are deciding what constitutes good writing. So as language assessors and as teachers, what do we mean by writing, Victoria?
Well, Hamlion defined it as a piece of continuous written text of 100 words or more. Yeah. However, we need to take into account that the level plays an important role here when deciding the how long a text will be, because our A2 key students might find a bit challenging to write 100 words.
Yeah, and our young learners probably won't be writing 100 words. The writer or the candidate or the student needs substantial freedom to create a response to the stimulus, whatever the stimulus is. Why is substantial freedom, Victoria, and not total freedom?
Yeah, because if we give too much freedom, we may not be able to assess all the texts against a common yardstick. So we need specifications.
Exactly. I know it's very easy in class sometimes, especially with young students, write about your holidays, but you get back so many different pieces of text. And if you're really clearly looking at well-defined criteria, I think it's much better to try and support and guide them towards creating a piece of writing that serves our purposes. And within an examining or an assessment situation, Victoria?
Yeah, a piece of writing is assessed by raters who have been trained to be able to measure performance against a common yardstick. So our examiners need to be familiar with the criteria and use them and apply them in the same way for each level.
in the most fair and objective way as possible. And as we said before, the better the students are guided towards creating the piece of writing, the easier it is for us. So we're especially interested in sampling from a specific domain of writing in a written test or in a piece of homework. And it is therefore useful to first of all describe the domain very clearly so that we are extracting the samples from our students or from our candidates that serve our purposes. So time for a little quiz. I was trying to open the chat box. Does anybody know what year saw the first ever Cambridge English exam? When was the first ever Cambridge Assessment English exam taken? Guesses in the chat box, please. Ooh, 2003? Slightly off. 1988? No idea. Have a guess. 1968? Getting closer. 1980s? No. 1980s were a great decade. That's when Victoria and I were born. 1865? Ooh, closer. 1865 is around the beginning of Cambridge Assessment as an entity, the University of Cambridge Local Examination Syndicate. Somebody's got it there. Well done, Norhan. 1913. 1913 was indeed the first ever Cambridge English exam. Which exam was it, Victoria?
It was proficiency exam.
Proficiency, pretty tricky, right at the top, C2. How many candidates were there?
There were only 3.
Only 3, and I think they were examined for 12 and a half, 13 hours. David can confirm that in the chat box. And they all failed. Not wonderful. We've come on a bit of a way since then. We now have nearly 7 million candidates, and I think, I don't actually have figures on passes, but a lot more candidates do pass our exams today, which is good news for us, good news for everyone. So here is an example. Why are we talking about this, Victoria? Why are we talking about the first exam?
Because we are going to show our participants a task that was included in that exam, an English essay.
So in the writing paper, we had this. Write an essay on one of the following subjects. The effect of political movements upon 19th century literature in England. What else, Victoria?
Elizabethan travel and discovery, the Indian mutiny, and the development of local self-government. So
no wonder everybody failed. What is wrong? What is wrong with this? What's wrong with these questions? If we're trying to assess people's level of English, what is wrong with these questions? Too vague, general, too broad.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned already.
Exactly. I mean, this is not really testing people's English. I mean, one criteria could be how well they write the essay, but if they don't know anything about any of these, they're not going to do very well. Far too much reliance on background knowledge. We try as far as possible in all of our exams, in all parts of our exams, to ensure that the tasks require as little background knowledge as possible. No specific knowledge is required to answer any of our writing tasks or any tasks from any of our other papers. So where have we got to now, Victoria? What do we use to help design our tasks and thus our criteria?
We use the Cambridge English model of writing, which is very different from what we have just seen. Yes,
quite different, I think. So where do we begin with the Cambridge English model?
We start with the message. This is the piece of writing that candidates produce in the task.
Yeah, this is what we are expecting to sample from the students, the candidates. What we're expecting them to produce is at the center of how do candidates start their quest on producing a message, Victoria?
Well, once this is clear, we have the cognitive aspect. That is the ideas that we come up with for that specific task.
Exactly. So we'll all begin with putting together the ideas that we are going to then transmit into a message. Once we've had the ideas,
we need to put them into words. So the linguistic aspect.
Okay, so cognitive, linguistic, how we will be transmitting those ideas into language. And, sorry, this slide's gone a little bit mad. And whenever we're writing anything, what do we have to consider, Victoria?
We need to take into account who we are writing to, why, and the type of text that we need.
Exactly. So this is what we call the socio-linguistic aspect. Oh, sorry, it's going to go through again. And all of these come together to create the message, but there is massive interplay between all of them at all times. So I think when creating our tasks, we have to clearly signpost these various areas. And of course, this informs the criteria that we'll be using to mark that task.
Yeah.
So here is an example. It may be familiar to many of you. What do you think this is from, Victoria? Looks like a B1.
Yeah, it's a B1. I didn't know if you wanted the participant, if it was a rhetorical question for me.
It's B1, a pretty standard, pretty familiar B1 task.
Yeah.
This is part of a letter you receive from an English friend. My grandmother's given me some money. Write a letter giving your friend some advice. So how can we break down, how do we relate this to the Cambridge English model of writing, Victoria?
Well, we are going to identify all the aspects that are included in the task and that reflect what we have just seen. So the first thing is to identify the topic. So the ideas that we need to include. In this case is, what do you think I should do?
Okay, very clearly outlined there. Moving on from topic.
We also need some context to be able to come up with ideas. So in this case, my grandmother has given me some money.
Part of a letter as well, there's always this sort of context introduction to writing tasks, an introductory sentence. Part of a letter you say from a friend, my grandmother's given me some money. So we know under which or in which context we are. Sorry, this slide has gone a bit mad.
I think maybe the connection or...
Oh, it could be. Next.
Yeah, the reason why we are writing, the purpose. So in this case is to help our friend decide between the different options.
Okay.
So buying a camera, going on holiday, or saving the money.
Okay, so this will affect the cognitive, the linguistic, I imagine. And then lastly, sorry, it's going... the target reader.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will very much affect the socio-linguistic and the kind of language that you will be using, depending on who you are writing to.
Yep.
Your English friend. Sorry, apologies for the slide. There you go. So within every writing task, especially from the Cambridge English qualifications, A2 key, B1 preliminary, B2 first and upwards, all of these elements are present and identifiable in every task that is set. And why is this useful, Victoria?
Well, because it's going to guide how we are going to write. So we need to take this into account in order to be able to produce the task successfully.
Exactly. And the last thing, word count. All right,
Yes.
let's start the little word count chat. This is always fun in the chat box. Our word counts are there as guidance. Okay. So here is about 100 words. B2, I think it's 140 to 190 words. We provide these as guidance to the candidates, okay? And this is based on us having millions and millions of candidates writing these tasks successfully. It's not the be-all and end-all, okay? If they write fewer than 100 words, it's not the end of the world, okay? If they write more than 100 words, again, it's not the end of the world. There are lots of myths that fly around that, our examiners draw a line. If you go 10% over, they draw a line and don't mark anything else. That's not true. Our examiners read everything that is written by each candidate. And the last thing we want in an exam situation is candidates counting words. Oh, I've got to lose 10 words. Oh, okay. Give them the practice. They should be writing around what the word count is, but they're not going to fail if they, go over the word limit or slightly under. Okay. So, as I said, practice is essential, but we don't want them wasting time in an exam situation, counting words and freaking out about that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've had a look at how we construct a writing task, bearing the Cambridge English model in mind.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need after the task? What do we need as assessors or teachers, Victoria?
We need the assessment criteria to be able to assess the text fairly.
So this is the criteria that we use for all of our general English qualifications. It's split into 4. So in the chat box, what is the C? What does the C stand for? Any ideas?
Mm-hmm.
I can't see the
there
chat
you go.
box.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So it's content. Yeah, they all know it. They all get it.
Excellent. Content. And the O?
Organization. There you go.
Excellent.
Super quick. Participants.
Organization. CA, which is my favorite and perhaps one of the trickiest to interpret.
Almost. Communicative assessment. So nearly there.
Communicative achievement.
Yeah.
And L, the one we all automatically focus on as English teachers.
Yeah, language. You'll guess.
Lovely. Excellent. Well, we all know our stuff, which is encouraging. So these 4 criteria are applied to writing. Communicative achievement, we do not assess at A2. Similarly, in our speaking tests, we don't assess discourse management at A2. Why is that, Victoria?
Because we need to take into account our level, the students' level, and before B1, the students don't have the resources to be able to assess this. So, the tasks to assess communicative achievement and discourse management only appear at B1 because it's when it's fair to assess this.
Exactly, and also the amount of language that they're producing at that level isn't really sufficient to fairly assess on that criteria. So these are the 4, and they are equally weighted. Okay, so each candidate will get a mark for each of these, and they are equally weighted. So yeah, we all have those students who are never going to put an S on third person singular, but it's not going to be the end of the world if they write a well-organized text, they satisfy the content criteria and communicative achievement, they can still do well. So I think making students aware of this and of these various aspects of their writing. So a lot of students just think grammar, vocab, but there's a lot more to a piece of writing. And in Cambridge English exams, as you know, grammar and vocabulary are tested elsewhere. They are tested, very specifically and intensively in use of English, for example. A lot of comprehension of vocabulary and more complex grammar in the reading and the listening. So we've got to really think about what we are focusing on for writing, I think, when we're setting tasks and assessing them. So let's have a look at another task. What is this, Victoria?
Well, it's a task from the new B1 preliminary exam, the revised exam.
We will look at communicative achievement in a little bit more detail now, Sana. So yeah, this is from the post-revision B1 preliminary. You see this announcement in your school English language magazine. What makes you laugh? Write an article telling us what you find funny, who you enjoy laughing with, etc., etc. David can now give you a link, I hope, in the chat box to the assessment criteria for B1 preliminary. So I think you can pop that link in the chat box. If not, you can access all of the criteria that we use via the teacher's handbooks, which are available.
It's handout 1.
On our website. So handout 1 via the link that David can provide. And we would like you to download that. Thank you very much, David. If you can download handout 1, you will have this task, I think, and the B1 preliminary writing criteria. Another thing to note about our qualifications criteria is that, yes, somebody has mentioned in the chat box, they are marked in 5 bands. Well, 6. 0. We hope none of your students would get a 0. And then bands 1 to 5. So we have descriptors for each criterion in band 1, band 3, and band 5. So if a candidate displays, or if a candidate's piece of writing has features from band 5 and band 3, they will get a 4. 3 and 1 are 2. And what you have just accessed is the B1 criteria. And a band 3 is B1. Okay? A band 3, this is the same with our speaking criteria, is a B1. As you know, in the B1 preliminary exam, if the students do very well, they can get a certificate saying that they have demonstrated skills at B2. So the top end of B1, of the B1 preliminary exam, moves into B2. Again, the bottom end down into A2. So as I said, a band 3 is at level, B1. A band 5 in B1 is the same as a band 3 in B2. So all of the criteria overlap with one another. We're well aware that each level is not an island. If you're teaching IELTS, similarly, each band does not stand alone. And so our criteria all overlap to create a clear progression and a stacking of criteria. So they work as a whole. Yes, David Bradshaw in the chat box shared the link. If not, you can have a quick Google of B1 preliminary writing criteria and you should be able to find it quite rapidly. But David, do you think you could pop that link in the chat box again? So we're going to have a look at 2 sample answers for this task. Okay, so here is the first example. So what would we like our participants to focus on here, Victoria?
I think it may be a good idea to consider content and language.
Excellent. So we'd like you to give this a mark from 1 to 5 for content and language. Okay. How well have they satisfied the requirements of the task? And a mark for language. And remember, we are using B1 criteria here. Can you still hear me, Victoria?
I can.
Good. No, I'm having a little problem with my Zoom bar. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat. So you're going to have to help me with the chat. I'll keep an eye on the presentation. You keep an eye on the chat. Is that all right?
Okay. Yeah, I will try. I will do my best.
Collaborative approach to it. Oh, there it is. It's back. Thank you, David. There's the link. So bands 1 to 5.
Although there is not much variety in terms of tenses used. So mainly is present.
Yeah, there are some noticeable errors with agreement, prepositions, but the meaning can still be determined. So this is a 3. This is bang on B1, okay? This is what we would expect from a B1 candidate. Okay, do we have any disagreement going on in the chat box, Victoria? I can't see.
No.
Okay, good.
They are okay.
Right, let's have a look at this. A different approach. We'd like you now to focus on communicative achievement and organization. Some people were asking, what does communicative achievement mean? It's a combination, really. It's holding the target reader's attention, using the conventions of the task. So does this read like an article? Is it structured like an article? Does it have characteristics common to articles. And as we'll see a little bit later, it's also about successfully communicating ideas. So, organization and communicative achievement. Two for content and language. Ooh, this is a bit more. Content 3, language 2, 4, 4.
4, 4.
Oh, there can be some angry teachers. Yes, coherence, cohesion, that will come into communicative achievement and into organization. I know IELTS criteria is very slightly different the way it's organized to qualifications criteria. But coherence and cohesion will play into communicative achievement and organization and language, obviously. Ooh. Ooh. Got quite a spread of ideas going on in the chat box. A 4 for both. Right. Here are the examiner's comments. They get a 5. This candidate easily gets a 5. Communicative achievement is lovely. The conventions of article writing, sharing personal information, expressing opinions are used to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward ideas, like I was saying earlier. The topic's clearly introduced, and there's a nice balance between how the writer feels personally and how laughing affects the wider public. So communicative achievement, an easy 5.
Yeah. Organization. The text is well organized and coherent with a variety of linking words and some cohesive devices, particularly for reference to avoid repetition.
We've chosen this one. I actually got a phone call a month or 2 ago. This is from the handbook for B1. And we'll just have a look back at it. I got a phone call from a teacher who was furious, saying, how can this get full marks for organization? There are no paragraphs. And no, there aren't any paragraphs. But if you look at how this is structured, as the examiner said, it's a really nice internal cohesion, nice use of referencing, etc., which all contributes to organization. Last time we did this webinar, we had lots of teachers in the chat box who were furious. This could get full marks because it doesn't have any paragraphs. But I would much rather, at B1, we would much rather have a cohesive text which is internally organized very well than, if we remember the previous one, it was 5 paragraphs, 6 sentences in 5 paragraphs. The punctuation is lovely. So paragraphing is not the end of the world. And when we get texts that have paragraphs thrown in for the sake of throwing them in, that can have a negative effect on organization, on communicative achievement, because it can break up the argument. In a negative way. Exactly. This is a nice, well-organized, coherent paragraph. There are connectors in here. And the use of punctuation as connectors. And again, this is B1. Okay, this is a B1 task. This candidate has demonstrated a B2 level here. The task that they were asked to write wasn't designed to extract B2 language, but they have performed very well in this, and they get 5s across the board. Okay. Right. What are we going to move on to now, Victoria? Right. So we've had a look. We've given you some B1 criteria. I think David might be able to give you B2, or is it all on the same link, Victoria?
Yeah, let me check just a second. No, now we need the second handout.
Okay. If David could pop that link up. Anyway, in the meantime, what's interesting about criteria, we find, writing criteria, the difference between lower level writing, so A1, A2, higher level writing, B1, C1, C2. B1 sort of sits in the middle between these two. But what characterizes lower level writing, Victoria?
And the focus is mainly on the control of language and that there is limited freedom.
Yeah, obviously they have quite limited freedom at lower levels because they're not going to be able to answer too spontaneously just because of the limits that the language
they need more guidance as well. Mm-hmm.
Higher level writing, we have a greater focus now on organization, register, and they will obviously have increased freedom. And I think a nice way of looking at it is the lower level writing we could describe as sort of knowledge telling, and the jump up to higher level writing, knowledge transforming. So as we said, communicative achievement only comes in at B1, but I think this is where it begins to split. If we have a look at B2 criteria, so remember a band 1 on B2 will be the band 3 on B1. Is that right? Is that right way around, Victoria?
I think so.
It is. So look at the three ideas that run throughout communicative achievement. Conventions of the task, in generally appropriate ways to communicate straightforward ideas. Once we get to a B2, it's conventions of the task to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward ideas. So this is B2, it's still communicating straightforward ideas using the conventions successfully. Once we get up into C1, it's using the conventions of the task effectively to hold the target reader's attention and communicate straightforward and complex ideas as appropriate. In Spain and Portugal, at least, I think in Italy and other areas of Southern Europe, we're getting more and more younger candidates, sort of 14, 15, taking C1 advanced, and a lot of them fall down in their writing, and we have teachers saying, but their language is perfect, their organization is wonderful, and I think this is sometimes where they fall. It's this ability to create and communicate complex ideas rather than straightforward ideas. I think sometimes the maturity of the students can be an issue. So if you have got access to the B2 criteria, I'd like you to have it in front of you. We're just going to think about this: communicative achievement and language. Okay, so have a quick look at that. So band 3 at B2, everyday vocabulary appropriately with occasional inappropriate use of less common lexis, a range of simple and some complex grammatical forms with a good degree of control. Errors do not impede communication. Okay? So bearing those two criteria in mind, what should we start with, Victoria? Let's start with language.
Yes.
So here we have two snippets, two extracts from answers from candidates at B2 first in the essay task. So number 1, teenagers are too young to teach other people about anything, is the title of the first one. And every country in the world has problems with pollution and damage to the environment. Do you think these problems can be solved? So we would like you to give each of these answers a mark for language. Okay? Using B2 criteria, give each of these a mark for language, please. You're going to have to tell me what... Oh, there you go. There you go. To make it clearer, you could put A and then a number and B and then a number so we know which one you're talking about. But each of these, a mark for language, please. I think my chat box is a little bit behind, but we do have a lot of teachers here. Thank you all again for coming. I hope this is...
Yeah, thank you.
I know a lot of you probably teaching IELTS, but again, the IELTS criteria are very, very clear. They're divided up slightly differently to the qualifications criteria. But I think... being aware of criteria, making sure our students are aware of them in all the writing they're doing can help enormously. Can you see any answers, Victoria? I can't yet.
Yes. Yeah? For B, we can see 2, 3. For A, 4. A3 and B2.
Ooh.
A4 and B5.
Okay.
A3 and B4.
Ooh,
A is the winner.
A is the winner. That's what we were hoping for. We were hoping that you would give A a higher one than B. So yeah, we can see here in A, this is nice. I'd say this is a 4. It's slightly above B2. Very nice multi-clause sentence, internal referencing, adults teach children and teenagers many other important things. It's a nice bit of language. This is slightly irregular because we use the criteria, and you have to remember this, and when you're using it as well, the criteria is only ever used to mark the piece of writing as a whole. Okay? We're using this as an example. So it would always be to mark the piece of writing as a whole, not individual sentences. But for our purposes, yeah, I would say A would get a 4. That's good. B2. It's not quite creeping into C1, but probably a 4. B, yeah.
There is room for improvement there.
Well, thank you, Victoria. It's very constructive. Yeah, obviously the cleaning, manufacturing water helps avoid extinction of ocean residents. I really like ocean residents. Yeah, on B2 criteria, this would probably be a 1, maybe a 2, maybe a 2. It's not great. But communicative achievement, can you give them a mark for communicative achievement, please? So communicative achievement for A and for B. And again, we like to think about using the conventions to communicate straightforward ideas, using conventions to communicate complex ideas. 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, A, 5, B2. Ooh, interesting. No, I would say the opposite. So, sentence A is a lovely example of good language, but they're not saying anything sort of world-changing. They're agreeing with the title. Yeah, they're saying it in a complicated way, but they're basically saying, adults teach children important things. If they weren't there, young people wouldn't know anything. So yeah, they're successfully communicating a straightforward idea. So that would be a 3. A 3 on the B2 criteria. Whereas below, yes, the language is getting in the way a bit, but this is a much more complex idea that's being communicated. So we have to make sure that water that is used in factories is cleaned, otherwise it will run down rivers into the ocean and cause extinction. So this could maybe get a 4. Obviously, each of the criteria overlap to a certain extent. So the language is affecting this a little bit, but it's a much more complex idea that this candidate is trying to convey. So they probably do better on communicative achievement than the first one, but obviously not as well on language. So just an example of how focusing on different criteria can point out to students where they need to improve. Okay, I hope that was clear. I'd love to have more time to go into this in more detail. You can probably tell Victoria and I love writing criteria, but we haven't today. So I hope that's sort of cleared up. I think communicative achievement, once you get from B2 upwards, you need to focus on explaining that to your students, to your candidates, and how they can use the conventions of the task and start transmitting more complex ideas successfully. We're running out of time, so moving on, we're going to have a look at feedback. Okay, so we've had a look at how the criteria are used by us to create tasks, how I think you as teachers should be aware of the criteria when setting tasks for your students, and if they are aware of it, then hopefully they will improve on all aspects of their writing. But one of the keys to ensuring that our students do improve their writing is giving them
feedback.
Good, useful feedback. So very quickly in the chat box, what is good feedback? What characterizes good feedback? Do you think? Again, you're going to have to keep me up to date, Victoria, because I can't see the chat box.
Already ideas, constructive.
Like Victoria gave some very constructive feedback earlier. There's room for improvement.
Specific, personalized. What to improve on and how.
Oh, nice.
Facilitating. positive, clear, and brief.
I think that is very important, making sure feedback is positive and constructive. I mean, and it's quite a skill sometimes to draw students' attention to what they've done really badly, but you've got to present it to them in a positive, useful, constructive way. What did we come up with, Victoria?
Yeah, I think all our ideas are already mentioned in the chat box. So feedback should be clear, it should include examples, and it should try to be concise. Yeah,
not too long. You don't want the feedback to be longer than the piece of writing, or lots of students are just going to ignore it. Focused.
Yeah, it should be focused on either the aim of the activity, if it's narrative, maybe tenses, range of vocabulary, or also on the most important points or biggest problems. So you need to make the decision on what to focus on when giving feedback.
Yeah, I think this is very important. It's so a lot of us automatically as English teachers highlight all the mistakes. But it depends very much on what the purpose of the piece of writing is. And sometimes I think we have to restrain our red pens or whatever color pen you use. Because if the aim is using narrative tenses, practicing our narrative tenses, spelling mistakes on some vocab, does that matter? Do we want to draw attention to that, or do we want to focus on what we were hoping to achieve with the piece of writing? And as we all said, as far as possible, try and make sure that our feedback is both positive and constructive.
Yep.
We've got another little quiz for you. Can you complete this, please? It's a sentence completion, which you'll be familiar with if you're preparing students for Cambridge exams. 3 words. Good feedback does not And I'll give you a bit of help. It's actually good feedback does not
3 words. Yeah.
3 words. 2 syllables in the first word for those of you who are concentrating. Let's see if I can open the chat box. Ooh. Very nice, Rashi. Good feedback does not criticize, but critique. Great answer. Great answer. Find an error. Yara. Yara's done it. Do you think she might have come to one of our previous ones? Excellent. Yes. Good feedback does not require a grade. We're well aware that many students want a grade. And we're not saying never give them a grade. And obviously grades are necessary within some context, to keep progress off them, but keep progress of, God, what am I talking about, Victoria? Keep a record of their progress, etc. And a lot of them do demand a grade, yes. But do we need to give, a 6 out of 10, a B, a C on every piece of writing? I don't think so. Again, it depends. It depends on what the piece of writing is. But what we're going to look at here...
We are going to look at different ways in which we can give feedback as a way to encourage process writing. So on the next slide, we are going to see that maybe the first time our students handing a piece of writing, we can give them this type of feedback. So very general one, there are a few mistakes, something positive, some nice language, but ideas to help them improve. Could link sentence better.
Exactly. So I know this is difficult in some contexts where writing is all handwritten, asking the students to go and rewrite a whole piece, but they're not going to be very happy with. I think in the current situation where a lot of us are working a lot more online than we did before, it's a wonderful opportunity to try and get our students doing this process writing, which Victoria was talking about. So drafting, revisiting. And I think you could get 3 or 4 pieces of homework out of one writing task. So on the first submission, you could give them feedback like this, very general, high-level feedback. Give it back to them. Okay, taking that feedback into account, can you rewrite it, please? Second time it comes in,
yeah, we can give this type of feedback with codes for the different aspects to include, so vocabulary, spelling, tenses. This is pointing the students in the direction of where the problem is, but asking them to reflect to correct the mistake.
Exactly. Okay, so it's guiding them towards the area, but again, give it back to them like this and get them to resubmit the work again. So I think 3 or 4 submissions, and then give them a grade on the third version of a piece of writing. And I think this is very important. I mean, for younger students, but also for as they grow older into more academic writing, drafting is a great skill. And I think a lot of students don't do it enough. They sort of do their piece of writing, hand it in, see their grade, and then forget about it.
George, Victoria, very sorry to interrupt, but I'm afraid
have them revisit, have them think about where they've made mistakes and where they've improved.
Hi,
yes,
George, Victoria.
Okay?
Yeah, very sorry to interrupt, but we need to finish because we have another webinar starting very soon.
Okay.
Sorry, George, I don't know if you can hear our colleagues because they are telling us that we need to finish.
Okay, well,
hear them.
No, I can't hear anyone. Okay. But we've got, 3.5 minutes?
Sorry, Victoria, but we have another webinar starting.
A resource, which we think you should all use. We'll go through this very quickly now, so we do need to finish. Okay. But if you don't know this already, Write and Improve is... and set up an account. We would encourage you to, because then you can keep an eye on everything that you've done. You have different workbooks: beginner, A1, A2, intermediate, B1, B2, and advanced, C1, C2. Your students can choose a task. I'm sorry, this is going to be a bit quick. This is an example of an A2 task. Write a paragraph describing your home. So that's the task. Here is what I wrote as an A1 student. So you type that into the box, click check, and in seconds, you get instant feedback, okay? You can see there, we've got a mark for content. Did you write about the question? 5 is best. And then below that, you get language-specific feedback. So the turquoise exclamation marks are word-level feedback. So did you mean to write friend? But what is this not, Victoria?
It's not a spell checker.
Exactly. It's not a spell checker, and it's not Grammarly. Grammarly is... I'm not a fan of Grammarly. Some people are. Grammarly is based on native writing, bad native writing. This is based on learners' writing.
Victoria, okay? I'm really sorry, but we have to finish.
It directs students towards where the error is.
Can we please wrap it up because we have another webinar starting?
So they can then go back, redraft. We've improved this a bit. I think this gets up to an A2. Type it in. Yeah, we got up to an A2 here. You can see we looked at the feedback screen earlier. This is the changes screen. So they can see the changes that they've made, resubmit, and see how their writing has improved. Okay, please use this. It's amazing. You can set up workbooks and send links to your students. And there's also a functionality called Class View, where you get a detailed view of every attempt at a task that a student has done, and you can see how they are improving. We're going to have to finish there. Sorry, we didn't quite get to the end of Write and Improve, but please use it. The premium feature, Class View, that I mentioned, is now, if you sign up now, you get 2-month free trial, and it will transform your lives as teachers. It's a great way to keep an eye on all of your students, and you can put away your pens, focus on other criteria rather than just language.
Maybe we can share the link to the survey, George?
Yes, sorry, I'll just get to that now. I'm going to click through. Sorry, everyone. We get a bit carried away with Write and Improve. We love it so much. Class View. This is Class View, so you get graphs on each student. It's wonderful. But for now, could you please scan this QR code to begin the survey, or use that web link to access? I think, as Peter was saying at the beginning, you will get your certificates in 3 to 4 working days, sent to the email registered with, but you need to complete the survey. So again, thank you all very much. Sorry we went slightly over time. And use the criteria. It's there to help you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all very much. Thank you so much for a wonderful talk.
Wash your hands, stay at home. Keep